The book of Numbers begins with a head count of the entire Jewish people before they depart from their Sinai encampment on the way to the Promised Land. Moses organizes the massive endeavor with the help of representatives from each of the tribes. And in the end comes to, and I'm going to approximate it here, as 600,000 people who make up the Israelite community. So what we have here is the conducting of a census. We Americans know about the taking of a national census and the problems such undertakings engenders. One of the big problems is reach. How do we ensure that everyone is counted? The U.S. Census has historically undercounted populations, particularly communities of color and immigrants. For the 2020 census, a controversial citizen question was considered, creating a risk that non-citizens who had been counted in prior censuses would be discouraged from participating. There is a lot at stake in these numbers because they help determine the allocation of resources and the right to be represented. These numbers reset the country's political map, determining how many congressional seats and electoral college votes each state gets for the next 10 years. And now, 3.5 years later, it is clear that what had been feared has in fact occurred. According to data reported in the New York Times, although the Bureau did not say precisely how many people it missed entirely, they were mostly people of color, disproportionately young ones. The census missed counting 4.99 of every 100 Hispanics, 5.64 of every 100 Native Americans, and 3.3 of every 100 African Americans. In contrast, for every 100 residents counted, the census wrongly added 1.64 non-Hispanic whites and 2.62 ethnic Asians. We might ask, what is our obligation when thinking of the undertaking of conducting a census? And what is our obligation to those we know we didn't count, and so don't get a voice and don't get the resources that we actually, and they have actually paid into? If a census is meant to capture a moment in time and to help paint a picture of a society, the very way we choose to count and the way we choose to address the known shortcomings of our process determines not just who we are at the moment, but actually who we want and aspire to be as a society. The very idea of a democracy, a government in which the locus of power is invested and resides in the people, and exercised by them directly or indirectly through representation, underscores the importance of efforts to ensure a fair and inclusive census and policies that empower the uncounted. In fact, the organization Fair Count aims to build long-term power in communities that have been historically undercounted in the decennial census, underrepresented by their inability to vote, and whose communities are often torn apart in redistricting. Which leads me back to our biblical census and its shortcomings. A midrash famously teaches that just as there were 600,000 Jews at Sinai, there are 600,000 letters in the Torah. This beautiful midrash has given rise to countless beautiful divrei Torah about the value of every Jew counting, no matter how close they were to Moses at Mount Sinai, or how far back in the pack they may have been. Just as a Torah requires each and every little letter must be intact for the Torah to be a Torah, to be kosher, and to be allowed to be read, so our community needs every single one of us. Every one of us, whether we come regularly, semi-regularly, or not at all to Shabbat services, is a respected and beloved member of the community. But we actually have a problem. The Midrash has a problem because there are not 600,000 letters in a Sefer Torah. In fact, it's not even close to 600,000 letters. The Torah contains, and we can now do this very easily because there are online software and formats and things that can count up the number of words in a Torah in an instant. Go to Safari.com and try it yourself. The number is actually about 300,000. While the rabbis lacked the sophisticated software to procure an accurate count in seconds, they surely knew when they glibly gave midrashim about 600,000 letters, they knew that their count was a way off. They knew it. So how can we understand, perhaps even rescue the midrash, this beautiful midrash? The mystical tradition has long taught that the black letters of the Torah scroll only make up half the story. The other half, and potentially the more revealing truths, are actually contained, says our mystical tradition, in the white spaces that accompany each letter. Just as in conversation, where what is not said is often just as important and maybe more revealing than what is actually said aloud, the white spaces that surround the black letters are equally vital to understanding what the Torah is trying to teach us. If we count not only the 300,000 letters, but the 300,000 white spaces, we come up to the 600,000, the number of Israelites mentioned as being at Mount Sinai. Yet another more troubling contradiction lurks below the surface of this text. Because when the Torah records that 600,000 Israelites stood at Mount Sinai, it is again only telling, at best, half the story. As feminist critics like Judith Plaskow and Rachel Adler and others have taught, a closer look at the text reveals that twice that number participated in the Mount Sinai encounter. The Torah records only the names and the experiences and the stories of men. The women who stood aside them have been erased from our counting. They are not included. Not a single one is included. Not even Miriam is included in the 600,000 total number of Israelites that our Torah says were standing at Mount Sinai. Again, half is visible and half is invisible. Just as our understanding of Torah is only complete when we count both the black letters and the white spaces, our understanding of ourselves is only complete when we notice the entire community. That means really seeing those who have traditionally counted and those who have traditionally been excluded, who have historically faded into the background, like the white spaces. And as I said before, the ethical community needs to consider not only who's been historically counted, but how do we address the misgivings inherent in our process of counting? And how do we meet the needs of those who we know have been undercounted or never counted? In fact, the term and use for our parsha for taking a census is Sa'u Rosh, from that same word nasa we talked about before, which means lift up the head. This strongly suggests that the act of counting a person is to lift up their heads, to help them feel that their lives and their contributions have dignity and meaning. So we now understand the horrific nature of building in a method that undercounts and doesn't count people. The importance of counting is found in the Torah, but continues throughout our tradition. The Hebrew title of our series on graceful aging this year was from a verse in Psalms. Limnot Yamenu Kain Hodah. Teach us to count our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Yes, each person counts, and each of us must strive to make each moment count and everyone else around us count. And the importance of counting is found in a more contemporaneous poem by Yehuda Amichai, the great Israeli poet, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Count them. Yes, you can count them. They are not like the sand upon the seashore. They are not like the stars of the heaven for multitude. They're like lonely people on the corner and in the street. Count them. See them. Seeing the sky through ruined houses, find a way out of the stones and come back. What will you come back to? But count them. For they do in their time in dreams, and they walk around outside, and their hopes unbandaged are gaping, and they will die of them. Count them. Too soon have they learned to read the terrible handwriting on the wall, to read and write upon others' walls. And the feast goes on in silence. Count them. Be present, for they have already used up all the blood, and there's still not enough, as in a dangerous operation where one is exhausted and beaten down like 10,000. For who is judge and what's judgment, unless it be to the full extent of night and the full severity of compassion? Let's teach our eyes to count and see what is in front of us. Let us see what usually is not only seen, but also unseen, in light and in dark. To count those who come, but to count those who don't. Amichai's poem, like the Midrash, does not highlight the heroes we usually promote. It focuses upon individuals who are typically not seen or counted. This poem challenges us with the sense of urgency to view the uncounted with the full severity of compassion. That phrase, the full severity of compassion, demands that we see other people as deserving of decency, rights, and the feeling that their lives and contributions have dignity and meaning. It's a lesson, I think, that we at Am Hayam have worked hard on and striven for, and sometimes accomplished. Here, we try to ensure that everyone who comes through our doors, the physical ones, or the live stream ones, or the Zoom ones, matter. Whether they are Jewish or not, whether they join or not, whether they know Hebrew or not, whether they are versed in halacha or not. Here, everyone's voice is welcome in our discussions, at our meetings, in our deliberations. This understanding of what matters is the severity of our compassion, and that we offer it constantly to each other and ourselves is one of the many, and perhaps one of the most important lessons I will take with me when I return to the desert a final time. So I thank you for counting me, for Se'u Rosh, for lifting me up and helping me feel that my life and my contributions here had dignity and meaning. May the severity of compassion continue to be part of Am Hayam's striving and ethos. Alavai. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Bruchim to you.